Everyone, that is our penultimate session finished, which means that we are fast heading towards our final session of the day. It's difficult to believe that 23 hours ago just now we were kicking off the Youth-A-Thon, but here we are, 23 sessions done and heading towards our final one. So I think that we do appear to have our presenters all here. So if you would all like to join me on screen, I'll just give you a brief introduction to your session, and thank you all for joining us. I know that you're all coming from all over the world, and I'm sure that for some of you it's not a great time of day, but thank you all for coming today to be part of the Youth-A-Thon and for taking the baton home for the final session. So without further ado, this is our last session, which is being hosted by the GreenHope Foundation, and they're speaking about protecting our mangrove ecosystems for future generations, sharing case studies from the grassroots. So mangroves are some of the most precious and fragile ecosystems on the planet, and so this session is going to explore different case studies from around the world on mangrove conservation projects conducted by the GreenHope Foundation. If you're not familiar with their work, the GreenHope Foundation operates in 25 countries and reaches over 140,000 people. The foundation fights for climate justice, social upliftment, clean water and sanitation, sustainable consumption and production, peace and nuclear disarmament, gender equality, biodiversity conservation, ocean conservation, clean energy, future justice, and better rebuilding with local circular economies. All good stuff there. And the GreenHope Foundation uses education for sustainable development as a transformative tool to empower youth and adults alike, providing them with the knowledge, skills, attitudes and behaviours to think and act for a sustainable future. This session is being led by, we have a number of presenters here, but it's been led by Kehkashan Basu, who is also joined by Pragna Basupal, Erin Isabel, Natasha Giwala, Anchita Hedge, Alu and Pusa. So everyone, a huge welcome and thank you all for joining us, and I will let you all take it away.
Great, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Happy World Ocean Day in advance. We're really happy to be here with all of you today. And first of all, welcome to our GreenHope Foundation session. And we're excited to talk to you about something that is very close to all of our hearts, and that's protecting our mangrove ecosystems for future generations. My name is Kehkashan. I am the founder-president of GreenHope Foundation, and I am connecting with you from Toronto, Canada.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pragna. I'm the head of events of GreenHope Foundation, and I'm connecting with you from Dubai.
Hello, I'm Erin Isabel, and I'm the outreach officer of GreenHope Foundation from the UAE as well.
Hello, I'm Hitasha. I'm the chapter head of Oman.
Hi, I'm Anshita. I'm the chapter head of GreenHope India.
Our chapter head of GreenHope Liberia, Aliu, is currently on a project and is trying to get connectivity, so he will join us as soon as he can. But over to our session. As was mentioned earlier, GreenHope Foundation is a global social innovation enterprise working across 25 countries on localizing the sustainable development goals and really creating an equitable and resilient world for all through education for sustainable development that then translates into ground level actions. And one of our main areas of work is mangrove conservation. And today we will be sharing the case studies of our work on protecting our mangroves from across our different country chapters. Now, mangroves are some of our world's most beautiful, diverse, and fragile ecosystems. Mangrove forests are coastal plant communities that are part of a larger coastal ecosystem that typically includes mudflats, seagrass meadows, tidal marshes, salt barrens, and even coastal upland forests and freshwater wetlands and peatlands, freshwater streams and rivers. And in more tropical climates, coral reefs may also be a part of this ecosystem. Mangroves can serve as coastal protection from hurricanes and typhoons, and riverine mangroves help remove pollutants before they enter the adjacent coastal waters. And mangroves also are a critical habitat for so many species of fish and other wildlife, serving as fish and coastal shellfish nursery habitats and produce large quantities of leaf material that then becomes the basis for a detritus food web. So there exists enough documented research that proves these ecological functions, but sadly, over time, mangrove forests have been dredged and filled for decades to provide other coastal uses like ports and housing. And it's estimated that there are 180 square kilometers of mangrove forests in the world, but unfortunately, major historical losses have occurred in the last century. And anecdotal estimates are that up to 50% of all mangroves that historically existed may have been lost to date, and that current rates of loss may be as high as 1% per year. So that is why it's so crucial that we take urgent action to preserve these fragile ecosystems before they're lost forever. And I shall now hand it over to our members to speak to us about the ground level actions that GreenHope Foundation is undertaking to protect our mangroves all across the world. With that, Anshita, over to you.
Thank you, Kehkashan. Mangrove ecosystems are sustainable resources that benefit the natural ecosystem of the surrounding area and also are extremely important to the human communities. India contributes approximately 3% to the world mangrove area. Largest stretch of mangroves in India lies in Sundarbans in West Bengal, covering an area of about 4,200 square kilometers. The following are the major mangrove forests in India. The Sundarbans, which is the largest in the world, stretching across India and Bangladesh. Mahanadi mangroves, Krishna Godavari mangroves, Pichavaram mangroves, which is the second largest in the world. Andaman mangroves, Kaveri mangroves, Goa mangroves, Ratnagiri mangroves, and the mangroves of Gujarat. Mangroves in India are highly degraded. According to the government of India, India has lost about 40% of its mangrove cover over the last few decades and is estimated to lose about 50% of its cover in the next half of this century. What caused this mass degradation? Our negligence did. In Sundarbans, majority of the mangrove forest land was reclaimed for agriculture and human settlement, leading to the mass destruction of the world's largest mangrove habitat in the world. Insufficient knowledge on the importance of this habitat resulted in its degradation along the east coast of India for aquacultural purposes. The state of Maharashtra is an example on how urbanization caused the degradation of mangroves. It once contained 7 islands with luxuriant mangroves, which then were reclaimed for infrastructural development. Oil spills caused the decline of mangroves along the coast of Gujarat and Visakhapatnam. Effect of climate change is an added threat to this habitat. The rising sea levels caused by the warming of the planet and human encroachment of land led to the decrease of mangrove along the width of the coastlines. Dense mangrove forests help reduce the devastating impact of tsunamis and coastal storms by absorbing some of the wave's energy. For example, during the 1999 Odisha supercyclone, mangroves significantly reduced the number of human deaths in one of the worst hit coastal districts in Odisha. Villages with higher mangroves between them and the coast experienced significantly fewer deaths than the ones with narrower or no mangroves. During our visit to the Sundarban stretch, the islands where we planted mangroves was the one which had been devastated by people cutting down mangroves, and thus the cyclone Aila had affected them even more. Hence, hundreds of meters of mangroves are needed to significantly reduce the effect of natural calamities. Apart from being the largest mangrove cover in the world, the Sundarbans are the only mangrove habitat which supports a significant population of tigers. However, the ecologically fragile Sundarbans region has lost 24.5% of mangroves due to erosion over the past 3 decades. Most of this erosion is permanent. This significantly affects the habitat of tigers living there. With shorter boundaries, the tigers have no choice but to wander to nearest villages for food and shelter, where it can be harmed or can cause harm. Our team from GreenHope Foundation went by boat into the Sundarbans. We planted scores of mangroves in an island that had been devastated due to locals cutting down the mangroves. The people there are so poor that they had to cut down the mangroves due to urban demand. But through our workshops, we highlighted alternative ways that reduced mangrove destruction. We also emphasized on how the mangroves protect them from sea storms. We conducted several education workshops for children and youth of all ages, elementary level to post-secondary level. The children performed an amazing play for us, showcasing the amazing biodiversity of the Sundarbans. We use the medium of art, dance, and music to spread our message and create awareness. Also, since many of our members spoke the local language, Bengali, it is easier for us to break the language barrier and really be able to connect with the children and villagers. This is one of our specialities at GreenHope. We all speak multiple languages, which aid us in localizing the SDGs on the ground. Now, I would like to hand it over to Hitasha.
In Oman and the UAE, there is only one kind of mangrove species present, which is Avicennia marina, which is commonly known as grey mangrove or white mangrove. This species of mangrove has adapted to the harsh, hot, and dry climates and the scarcity of water of the Gulf. In Oman, mangroves are found in various coastal parts extending from the North Batina region passing through the Governorate of Muscat, Sharqiya region, Wusta region, and the south of the Governorate of Dhofar. In the UAE, the Mangrove National Park encompasses a large portion of Abu Dhabi's eastern coast. Further south, in the Eastern Mangrove Lagoon National Park, a protected 8 kilometers coastal stretch of forest skirting from Abu Dhabi's airport, there is also a series of mangrove forested islands that spill out into the Arabian Gulf. GreenHope Foundation has long worked on the conservation of mangroves in the Middle East. In the UAE, we have planted hundreds of mangrove saplings over the past decade, engaging children and youth from all across our regions, from Oman to Bahrain as well. GreenHope Foundation members also kayak into the mangroves to conduct cleanups, where we have found the strangest things from rubber tires to metal pipes. It is really eye-opening to see how the wastes from the beaches and coastlines wash up and get stuck in these beautiful mangroves and destroy them. Mangrove trees are an important coastal resource. Yes, yet they face many kinds of threats in the different regions of Oman and UAE. The increasing exploitation of the mangrove wood, along with the lack of environmental awareness, which is one of the main causes of mangroves deterioration. Mangroves are attractive to livestock because they have rich nutrients, and hence many livestock owners take their animals to mangrove areas to graze and harvest mangroves leaves to use them as fodder. Excess of this leads to overgrazing and damage of the mangroves. The whole of nature also suffers like mangroves due to pollution caused by public parks, litter of solid waste, and etc. Beach visitors that collect fishes, shrimps, oysters, and other inhabitants of mangroves exploit it and use and cause imbalance in the ecosystem food chain, which eventually affects the fish stock.
Our next case study presentation was supposed to be from Aliu in Liberia, but as we mentioned, he is having tech difficulties as he's joining from the highway. So with that, I'd like to pass it on to Aaron to speak to us about Latin America and the Caribbean. Erin, over to you.
Mangroves are absolutely essential to the ecosystem in Latin America and the Caribbean, considering the fact that they attract terrestrial, freshwater, and marine species from surrounding areas. But in addition to actually improving the water quality and maintaining the integrity of their surrounding environments, what is unfortunate is that we humans have created some sort of misconception that these mangroves are dark, impenetrable, and insect ridden. And therefore, we have destroyed these fragile areas, utterly oblivious of the number of merits they provide for our ecosystems. So, in this presentation, I will speak to you about the mangrove species present in Suriname and the Bahamas, and also what GreenHope Foundation is doing to raise awareness about them. In both Suriname and the Bahamas, there are three common species of mangroves present: the black mangroves, the white mangroves, and the red mangroves. And for the Bahamas specifically, one more species is found more inland, which is known as the buttonwood species. All of these different species occur depending on the salinity of the water that they grow in. Unfortunately, there are quite a few threats that face mangroves in both Suriname and the Bahamas, some natural, but most due to human involvement. In Suriname, threats include overfishing, the inappropriate construction of dikes, which are barriers used to hold back water from a river or ocean. Sand and oil mining, infrastructure expansion, and coastal erosion are also some very, very serious threats that exist. But another threat is also the fact that very few people know what these mangroves are, and that is why advocacy is becoming increasingly important. In the Bahamas, similar issues exist. There is the natural threat of tropical storms, but also deforestation, pollution, runoff, coastal development, and overfishing, which are all highly preventable. So, in order to counter all these threats that these mangroves face, GreenHope Foundation conducts ground level work in these countries in collaboration with the local community. In July of 2018, we traveled to Suriname and conducted workshops for 1,000 plus students, informing them of these topics. We also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Youth Parliament to solidify our commitment towards creating an impact in Suriname, as you can see in the topmost picture. We also planted many mangroves along the coast of the Atlantic Ocean and worked with the mangrove conservation expert, Professor Naipal. In the Bahamas, GreenHope has conducted many mangrove cleanups with the local community. We also planted red mangroves in the area. GreenHope is also a strong proponent of using different mediums to communicate our green message. And so we conducted art workshops for the children in the Bahamas, thereby unleashing the children's creativity and in turn their passion for the environment. So with established chapters in these two countries, we are able to effectively and consistently conduct our work, ensuring that our message of sustainability remains ingrained within the people. And now over to you, Kehkashan.
Thank you, Erin. Now, while Suriname is the world's most forested country with 93% forest cover, Indonesia has the world's highest mangrove coverage. And these complex ecosystems are made up primarily of five types of mangroves: the white mangroves, red mangroves, the mangrove palm, Soneratia alba, and the Brugueria. And these mangroves, like all others, act as a major carbon sink, aiding in major carbon sequestration. But unfortunately, these mangroves are also being destroyed due to rapid urbanization, logging, as well as for harvesting sugar, palm oil, and shrimp, which in turn is annihilating the vast biodiversity that is supported by these mangroves. And in turn, the destruction of these mangroves and the weakening of its roots are leaving the coastal communities even more vulnerable to typhoons and sea storms. Now, GreenHope Foundation has planted mangroves in Bali, Indonesia. First, we boated through this amazing ecosystem where we witnessed its biodiversity, from all of the birds to the shellfish. And then we planted several square kilometers of the mangroves in a previously dilapidated area, again, due to urbanization. And we did this to do our bit to restore the ecosystem. And our members now continue this work on the ground, aiding in mangrove regeneration by planting several mangroves all across the country. And with that, I hand it over to Prabna.
Thank you so much, Kehkashan. So the Sundarbans, meaning the beautiful forest in the local Bengali dialect, is the largest mangrove forest in the world, as mentioned by my colleague, covering about 10,000 square kilometers, of which roughly two-thirds lie within Bangladesh. The Sundarbans forest is also a UNESCO World Heritage and Ramsar site and extends over 6,000 kilometers in Bangladesh. This mangrove ecosystem, including an extensive network of tidal waterways, supports astonishing biodiversity, such as vital populations of Asia's two last remaining freshwater dolphin species, both of which are considered endangered, and the only population of tigers living completely in the mangroves. The region also supports more than 300 types of plants and nearly 700 species of wildlife, including the threatened Indian pythons and crocodiles. Our members have planted hundreds of mangroves in the Sundarbans to aid in the restoration of the ecosystem. We conduct workshops to spread awareness to the local communities about the threats faced and the actions they can take to conserve their habitat. We also spread awareness through art. We encourage the children to come up with solutions for their local problems. This way, we also localize the SDGs. Some of the threats faced by the Sundarbans in Bangladesh are the rising sea levels. Seas are rising twice as fast in the Sundarbans as the global average suggests. A 2013 study from the Zoological Society of London found that the area is losing up to 200 meters of coastline a year, and this is causing an increasing level of saltwater intrusion within the Delta region. The Sundarbans also represents the last remaining habitat for the critically endangered Bengal tiger in Bangladesh. They also face threats from erosions, cyclones, and floods. Lastly, more than 13 million people call this area their home, making their living from fishing, shrimping, farming, and gathering honey. Thus, the unsustainable use of natural resources leading to the deterioration of the ecosystem has resulted in the loss of livelihoods. Back to you, Kehkashan.
Thank you, Pragna. And as I mentioned earlier, our teammate Aliu is facing tech difficulties, so we will be presenting his case study from Liberia, and hopefully he will be able to join us for the question and answer session so that he can speak more to his work over there. So let's just go back there. Apologies for that. Okay, so a bit of tech difficulties. Apologies for that. Okay, so the case study that our teammate Aliu has been focusing on with GreenHope Foundation is in the Liberia mangrove ecosystem in the Monserrado wetland. And the Monserrado wetland mangroves provide several benefits to the Liberian people, as well as contributing to the mangrove ecosystems of the world at large, ranging from ecological, economical, touristical, and developmental benefits. It serves as hotspots for biodiversity, like the other mangrove species around the world. There are several organism species that the mangroves provide habitat for. And due to this, they aid in the process of stopping soil erosion along coastline for the residents. They improve water quality. They improve the air quality by absorbing tons of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, again, working with carbon sequestration and as a huge carbon sink. And they improve the country's economy through revenue collection from recreational centers along the mangrove coastline. Now, with all of these abundant benefits that the mangrove provides to the residents of the country. It's still a manipulated ecosystem with severe negative effects and impacts from anthropogenic activities. Deforestation of the mangroves in the Monserrate wetland is at its maximum right now. Infrastructural development, humans are encroaching into the wetlands and mangroves, building homes and businesses. The open dumping of municipal waste is on the rise. Overexploitation of the mangroves for wood and logging purposes. An alarming increase of aquatic commodities exploitation for aquaculture activities in water bodies found within the mangroves locality, improper backfilling of the mangrove soil with municipal waste. And with all of the above activities within the mangroves are now depleting at its highest speed rate ever. Now, these are some of the pictures that our teammate took when he and his team conducted this case study to report back on how degraded the mangroves actually are. You can see on the slide the backfilling of the mangroves for infrastructural development, the deforestation, the tremendous amount of waste dumping that happens in the mangroves, both directly and indirectly, as our colleagues have spoken about before, where this is not an isolated case, but something that affects our mangroves all across the world. These also show the polluting of the mangroves with the tremendous amounts of plastic waste, which in turn choke the mangrove roots and indirectly kill the mangroves because they can't breathe anymore. So there is urgent intervention that is required. And this case study enables us to understand how much more we as civil society can and must do to preserve our mangroves, both in Liberia and all of the other countries that our colleagues have spoken about. Now, with that, we shall move on to our final case study of our newest chapter of GreenHope Foundation. Let's just get there. Okay, so our newest chapter of GreenHope Foundation is in Kiribati, which is a small island developing state. And as we all know, small and developing states face the severe effects of climate change, including sea level rise, which is proving catastrophic for the low-lying islands of Kiribati. Hence, mangroves protect their land from erosion and the ever-increasing sea storms. But like with all of our case studies, we have seen here too how increased urbanization is destroying these mangroves and thereby destroying the protection that it affords to the communities living on the coastlines. Our members have pledged to plant as many mangroves as possible to mitigate climate change and work towards the conservation of both our coastal and marine ecosystems through the preservation of mangroves. Now, as my colleagues have reiterated, GreenHope Foundation works on localizing the SDGs. Actually, our work spans across all 17 SDGs and 169 targets. Now, mangrove conservation plays a huge role in this, where we focus on implementing goals 14 and 15 on the ground, which of course, life on water and life on land, respectively, as well as recognizing the interconnections to all of the other SDGs. For instance, our work on education for sustainable development and ensuring that children and youth around the world are aware about the mangrove ecosystems and how they can preserve them, working with coastal communities on how they can see decent work and economic growth and green jobs, the creation of a green circular economy within their mangrove ecosystems, which is SDG 8, responsible consumption and production, as well as protecting our urban cities and communities, so goals 12 and 11 respectively, which we do through our mangrove cleanups and even the beach cleanups that surround the mangrove ecosystems. And of course, recognizing how important climate action and climate justices, which is goal 13, and particularly working on feminist sustainable development, which is again goal 5, engaging with the women and girls within the mangrove ecosystems where the burden falls upon them after climate change induced disasters that affect them of rebuilding better, as well as them having their leadership roles taken away from them and being victimized instead of recognizing how important they are to the preservation of their own communities. So we recognize how important mangroves are and their mangrove conservation are to all of the SDGs. And in particular, mangrove conservation contributes to the achievement of these particular goals on the slides 14 and 15, because mangroves form the bridge between our terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, and therefore their conservation is crucial for the betterment of humanity and the planet. Now, today we have heard case studies from all across the world, and we've seen how mangroves are amongst the most adaptive of Earth's ecosystems. But even with that, they too have been unable to survive the onslaught of human activities, destroying some of the most productive and biologically complex ecosystems on Earth. As GreenHope Foundation, we have seen firsthand how important mangrove ecosystems are, and it saddens us so much that despite being such a vast ecosystem that provides so many ecological services, we as human beings continue to ignore how important they are just because at many of the times we can't see them right in front of us, and therefore a lot of us believe that our activities do not affect them, but they do. And it is our responsibility as denizens of Mother Earth to conserve our mangrove systems. Several reports, write-ups, surveys speak about the importance of mangrove conservation, but how many people actually implement the actions on the ground? It is a wake-up call for all of us. Protecting our mangroves is not a choice, it's a responsibility. So go out there, create awareness, turn that knowledge into action, and let us together preserve our mangroves for people, planet, and prosperity. Thank you very much. And with that, we are open to any questions that you might have for our team, either about mangroves or more about our coastal ecosystems and our work on there. Okay, so we do have a question for everyone. What has been the biggest challenge what is your biggest challenge been in your work? So would any of our members like to start by answering that? Yeah, Kehkashan.
So I feel COVID would be the biggest challenge in our work because we aren't very able to go and do ground level work. We used to have so much and so many members could come at the same time, but now we are restricted.
Absolutely, I would agree with that with COVID-19. And what something that we have also seen is that the irresponsible disposal of medical waste and masks are now also affecting several of the mangrove ecosystems that we work with, where our members on the ground are reporting how harmful they have been. So while we cannot go out there physically to work on mangrove conservation, we are really fortunate that our members on the ground in the communities are taking forward the work there. And just yesterday, actually, in the Sundarbans, in one of the villages in Bangladesh, we had a very successful education workshop with the children. They're working on this being one of the topics of discussion. Would any of our other members like to talk about the challenges in their local communities?
I think I'd like to answer. So
Sure.
in the UAE, relative to other countries at least, I think the restrictions are definitely eased, but there's still quite a lot of rules. So it prevents us from holding sessions like we normally used to 1 to 2 years back. So ideally we'd like to have in-person workshops and academies, environmental academies for the students. But because of COVID, we've had to switch online, and it's not like it's been a huge impediment for us because we did adapt relatively easier. So it's been a small challenge for us, but I think we're all managing it pretty effectively.
Absolutely. I do see other questions. But before we go on to that, Anshita or Pragna, do you have anything to add? Or if not, then I'm looking at the chat. Our next questions are, how can young people get involved with GreenHope Foundations? Are there any opportunities to volunteer with the project? And the answer to that, I can take that. Yes, absolutely. We are always looking for passionate young people and really passionate people in general to be able to work with us, to work on the ground. We are all about grassroots action and turning that knowledge into action, as we mentioned. And you can check out our work on greenhopefoundation.com and follow us on our social media pages. And if you register on our website, one of our team members will get back to you, and we'd be able to connect you with your local chapter head or even your city chapter head, and we'd be able to take forward the work there. So absolutely. And I see that there's one more question. How do you balance the vast ecological benefits of mangroves with the economic needs of local communities who might use the land for shrimp farming or other? I can also, yes, Pragna.
So one way that we manage both the economic benefits as well as to keep it sustainable is by encouraging the creation of circular economies. So we educate the local communities about how they can sustainably use the resources, natural resources, and in that way they can also support their also earn like a source of income and have support their livelihoods basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think like a really important, that's something that is not really discussed. So that's a really good question. Yeah, Erin.
I think, like everyone reiterated in their presentation, mangroves are definitely a line of defense for the coastal communities. So, and the fact that they also help purify the water. So, for the villagers, I think that plays a massive impact. So, that does benefit them. I mean, it does have a vast ecological benefit, but you can see that there's also this trade off with the economic need, and it benefits the local communities as well because of the number of benefits these mangroves provide. So
Yeah, absolutely. And we work on sustainable development. So we definitely recognize how important all three pillars of sustainability are, with the environment, the society, and the economy. And that's what we work to bridge. And another thing that is talked about, but not really implemented on the ground as much as we'd like, is the just transition. And I think that is really something that GreenHope Foundation works on to ensure that these communities whose livelihood is often driven by urban demand that calls for the destruction of these mangroves, how do we work to ensure that they still have sustainable livelihoods and a stable source of income while preserving the mangroves? So as Pragna and Erin mentioned, that is something that we do, moving towards local regenerative circular economies that are climate and gender smart. So in that way, we balance out the economic, the social, and the environmental sides. And let's see. Okay, for Kehkashan, what was it that motivated you to found GreenHope Foundation? I started my work when I was 7 years old. I worked on the ground for several years. And when I was 11 years old, I was invited to speak at my first UN conference. And when I was 12, I was the youngest delegate out of 50,000 delegates at the Rio Plus 20 Earth Summit, the Conference on Sustainable Development in Brazil, which at the time was the largest sustainability conference. And I realized that with me being the youngest and only 5 people under the age of 18, there was a severe lack of children and youth in the sustainable development process. And that is why on my return home, I founded GreenHope Foundation. And today, GreenHope Foundation works to provide that platform of learning and action all across the world so that children and youth and really all members of society are able to find their passion and work towards sustainable development in their own zones of influence. Okay, if there are any other questions, please do feel free to ask us. And I do see that there is another question. What is your favorite seahorse type? Would any of our members like to take that? I think mine's the long-snouted seahorse. If any of our other members want to. Yes.
Mine would be the yellow one. I think it's the yellow seahorse.
I think it's the tiger tail one, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah, the tiger tail, yeah.
Awesome. So if there are any other questions that we'd be happy to field those. And just to like mention, I think about the questions about how young people can engage. I started GreenHope at 12. All of our other members, right here, Pragna, Erin, Anshita, Hidasha, all joined us when they were very young. And specifically, I think Pragna, Erin, and Anshita joining us at like 12, 13, and 14, and Hidasha too. So I think it just proves that you're never too old or too young to make a difference. So just you're always welcome to join us. And what's next for GreenHope Foundation? Well, a lot. I think that we just started our newest chapter in Kiribati. Since we work on so many of the SDGs, actually all the SDGs, as well as mangrove conservation, we are working to rebuild better from the pandemic and really seeing how we can ensure that just transition and really involve everyone in a multi-stakeholder, intergenerational dialogue that turns into action on the ground. Would any of our other my colleagues like to answer that?
Like you said, I think our main goal is just to inspire more people and reach more people in different countries and ensure that as per the UN mandate of leaving no one behind in the road to sustainability, we all follow that and ensure that no matter what kind of environment you grew up in, there's always a way for you to contribute and be part of this process for all of us to reach this ideal world that we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of hard work involved, but that is what we sign up for when we want to create and maintain the sustainable world. And let's see if there are any more questions, or if not, I think like we can just, would any of our other members like to give any concluding remarks or anything? Hitasha, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, so today we have spoken to you about the great importance of mangrove forests and how they are endangered because of our faults and ignorance. But now is the time to change. So let us be the ones who nurture nature rather than harming it.
Amazing. Anshita?
Yeah, I think the importance of mangroves cannot be stressed enough. We must work hard and together to educate each one on the importance and value of these mangroves.
Anshita, you're muted. Yeah.
We we must work now because the value of these mangroves, it's unexplainable, and also we must work before the damage is irreversible.
Absolutely. Pragna?
So as we spoke about how the mangroves are such an indispensable part of the world, and they are refuge for such a variety of animal species, many of which are rare and endangered. And it also provides the means of livelihood for millions of families. So the conservation of such ecosystems lies in our hands. And if we don't take action now, we face the threat of losing millions of species. Thank you.
And Erin?
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. And with every passing second, it holds true that the future of our planet depends on how we treat it and how we treat our mangroves and our oceans. And the only way is literally if each of us do our part. So we need to ensure that we don't just talk about it, we actually implement ground level action. And only then will we ultimately build a world which is equitable and resilient.
Absolutely. Thanks, Erin. And my concluding remarks, I'd actually like to address the question, what is one way you stay inspired as you work? And just to echo what my colleagues have said, we work in some of the world's most marginalized communities, some of the world's communities that are absolutely destroyed by climate change induced disasters and social inequities. But what we realize is that the work that we are doing is for our present and future generations. And since we're dealing with problems that are most of the time wicked instead of tame, our actions might not yield results right away, but it will yield results for our children and our grandchildren and for future generations. So that is something that is really important. So having the passion, working really, really hard, honesty, empathy, and positivity, these things inspire us to keep going and keep working towards a sustainable future. And with today's theme of mangrove conservation, this is one of our world's most important ecosystems. And if we don't preserve it now, as my colleagues have mentioned, it will be too late. So let us not wait for that to happen. Let us act right now. Grassroots actions are so important, and together let us achieve and create and maintain the future we want. Thank you very much, and over to you at World Ocean Day.
Thank you so much, Kehkashan. I could not have asked for a better way to close out Youth-A-Thon. Your session was so inspiring. I love so much the work that you guys are doing. I'm really excited to see everything that you guys accomplish moving forward in the future.